Imagine growing up not knowing who you really are, being left on the doorstep of an orphanage, with only a crumpled note and an old necklace as clues. This is my story. After 40 years of unanswered questions, I finally found my mother, and discovered secrets that would change our lives forever. Get ready for a story of pain, overcoming, unconditional love, and redemption. If this story touches your heart, leave a comment and share it with someone who also needs to believe that miracles exist. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories like this. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories that will touch your soul. I never knew the warmth of a mother's embrace, the smell of a cake baking in the kitchen oven, the sound of a mother's laughter rocking her daughter on lazy afternoons. My first home was a gray, damp building, where rusty cribs creaked with every breeze that passed through the broken windows. There, among forgotten children and exhausted employees, I learned that love was something that was given up for lost, before even dreaming of it. I was found at the entrance to the Santa Marta Orphanage on a rainy morning in 1985. I was carrying only a faded blanket and a crumpled note, written in shaky letters and with an almost palpable urgency. Please take care of her. She deserves more than I can give. There was no signature. There was no name. There was no clue other than the tears that had already dried on the paper. My first years there were a haze of unfamiliar faces, cold beds, and sleepless nights. The aunts at the orphanage did what they could, but it was impossible to give individual love to so many children who were starving for a touch, a look, a word. I learned early on that the world was a place where you had to be strong, even when everything inside you screamed in fear. The other children made up stories about their parents, that they were kings, movie stars, travelers in faraway lands, but I could never lie to myself. The truth was quieter and more brutal. Whoever left me there would never come back. Whoever gave me life had chosen to move on without me. When I turned 5, I noticed that some girls were being taken away, some holding hands with smiling couples, others amid tears and broken promises. I watched, silently, with a bitter hope planted in my chest, until I understood that, for me, no one would come. There were never any birthday parties with visitors. There were never any curious eyes on me. I was invisible, like a forgotten painting on the wall of an empty hallway. At the age of 12, I started asking questions. I scoured old records whenever I could, turning over papers for any information about my origins. But all that existed was that note, now kept like a treasure inside my most secret drawer. The aunt smiled pitifully and looked away. It was as if my story was buried under tons of dust and silence. At 17, when the orphanage announced that I would soon have to leave to make room for younger children, a primal fear gripped me. Where would I go? Who would I be without those walls? Without that loneliness that was somehow already a part of me? I left with a small bag and empty pockets. On my chest, I carried the crumpled note, and an emptiness so great that it seemed to consume me from the inside out. I spent years living in shelters, rented rooms, and doing temporary jobs that paid little and demanded a lot. With each new face that crossed my path, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, that person might recognize me. But time passed, and hope was buried by the urgencies of survival. Until, at the age of 40, on an ordinary afternoon, everything changed. I was cleaning out my small apartment, a cramped space, but it was mine, when I found the note again. The shaky words seemed to glow in the dim afternoon light. She deserves more than I can give. I stood there, reading and rereading it, as if I could tease out new information from between the lines. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something inside me was pulsing, a restlessness I hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was time to look for answers. Maybe, even after all this time, there were still hidden truths waiting to be discovered. The next day, I sat down at my old computer and started researching. I used the name of the orphanage, the approximate date, the location. I emailed old institutions, looked up public records, and went on family reunion forums. I didn't know exactly what I expected to find, but something inside me told me not to stop. For weeks, there were no answers. Just the echo of the emptiness that was so familiar to me. But then, an email arrived. It was from a woman named Lucia, who said she had volunteered at the orphanage in the 1980s. She remembered a rainy night, a child who had been left in a hurry, a note she had read before handing it over to the administrator. "I remember her eyes," Lucia wrote. "They were just like yours." My heart nearly burst in my chest. I arranged to meet her at a simple coffee shop in the city. I spent the next few days imagining what it would be like, what she would tell me, what secret she was keeping. Every minute felt like an eternity. On the appointed day, I arrived early. The smell of fresh coffee and baked bread filled the air, but all I could feel was the nervousness that churned in my stomach. When Lucia walked in, I recognized her immediately. A gray-haired lady with a shy smile and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of many untold stories. She sat across from me, and for a moment we just looked at each other. There wasn't much to say. She knew who I was. I knew she held the pieces of my puzzle. Lucia told me what she remembered. On the night I was left, a young woman, no more than a teenager, came to the gate carrying a bundle. She was wet, shivering with cold and fear. She asked only that the baby be looked after. She said she couldn't go back, that it was dangerous, that she had no choice. Before leaving, she left the note in Lucia's hands and disappeared into the storm. There was no name, there was no surname, but there was one detail that would change everything. The young woman wore a chain around her neck, with a pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. It was little information, but it was more than I had ever had. As I walked home that night, the note clutched in my hands, I felt for the first time in years something I no longer dared to believe: hope. And so began my true quest. In the days that followed, my mind could not rest. It was as if a door had been opened a crack, and now my entire being was trying to walk through it at once. I dreamed of the crescent-shaped pendant. I could see its outline even with my eyes open. It was a small, almost insignificant clue, but to me, it was an entire constellation, emerging on the dark horizon of my life. I decided to start my search at the city hospitals. If she was too young to raise a baby, perhaps she had sought medical help. Maybe someone had seen her, registered her name in some emergency room, in some maternity ward. I started going to public archives, requesting old records that already smelled of mold and were covered in dust. Many employees no longer knew how to access such old documents. At times, I felt like giving up, but each time discouragement crept in, I remembered the feeling I had that night when Lucia told her story. The feeling that, for the first time, I was heading in the right direction. After weeks of trying, a nearly illegible file caught my eye. A 1985 admission record with the description, "Young pregnant woman in labor, undocumented, refused full identification. Signed only as Anna, dwarf." It wasn't much, but the name and the time period were telling. My heart was pounding so loudly it seemed to echo off the silent walls of the archive. Beside the description was a brief note. Silver pendant, crescent moon, belongings left in the care of the hospital. I held the paper in trembling hands. There it was, the proof, the confirmation that I wasn't just chasing ghosts. I returned to the hospital that same afternoon, unable to wait another second. At the reception desk, a young receptionist listened to my story with a mixture of curiosity and pity. She consulted the electronic files, looked through files, made phone calls. After almost an hour, she returned with a shy smile. "We have a warehouse of old belongings. Some of them have never been claimed. Would you like to check them out?" I followed her through long corridors, where the smell of disinfectant mixed with that of ancient rust. Finally, she opened a heavy metal door, revealing dusty shelves and boxes labeled with dates that had faded with age. We searched together until deep in a forgotten bookshelf, I found a small metal box, labeled with the year 1985. My fingers hesitated for a moment before opening it. Inside, on a faded piece of cloth, lay a silver necklace with a crescent-shaped pendant. My eyes instantly filled with tears. It was like finding a fragment of the past frozen in time. I touched the pendant reverently, as if it could whisper answers directly to my heart. Next to the necklace was a sheet of paper, folded many times, almost disintegrating. I carefully unfolded it. It was a note made by the hospital staff. Patient with signs of psychological trauma. Young pregnant woman. Spoke of fear of persecution. Repeated the name Oliveira several times. Oliveira. Ana. Oliveira? I sat on the cold floor of the warehouse, clutching the necklace to my chest, trying to control the whirlwind of emotions. I had a new thread to follow. A name. A surname. A poorly told story that was finally beginning to reveal itself. In the following days, I began to investigate all the records of women named Ana Oliveira, who lived in the city in the 1980s. I found dozens of Anas, but none of them matched completely. Some had changed their names when they got married, others had already passed away. It was exhausting, meticulous, almost desperate work, until I found a different clue. In an old newspaper, a small advertisement caught attention. Information wanted about Ana L. Oliveira. Last seen in 1985, family seeking contact. The advertisement was signed by an unknown name, Vicente Oliveira. It was a thin thread, but it was all I had. With effort, I located an address linked to Vicente Oliveira, a site on the outskirts of the city, apparently abandoned for years. I went there on a cloudy afternoon, the wind whistling through the dry trees as if they also kept their own secrets. The house was in ruins. The broken windows, the peeling paint, the doors creaking in the breeze. I walked in with my heart in my throat. The wooden floor groaned beneath my feet as I explored the rooms covered in dust and cobwebs. In what appeared to have been the main room, I found a fireplace with some old boxes next to it. I rummaged through it carefully, and among the torn papers and faded photos, I found a photograph that stopped me in my tracks. She was a young girl. Dark hair, deep eyes, and a sad smile. Around his neck, a pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. It was her. It was Ana. On the back of the photo, a sentence scrawled, "Forgive me, my little star." I fell to my knees, crying like I had never cried before. In that moment, all the pain of my childhood, all the loneliness, all the abandonment, everything seemed to condense into bitter and liberating tears. I had found her, not in person yet. I didn't know where she was now, but I knew she existed, that she loved me enough to suffer for me all these years, and I knew I had to find her. It didn't matter how long it took. It didn't matter how many obstacles came up. I would find her, and I would tell her that, despite everything, I never stopped looking for her. I held the photograph to my chest as I walked back to my car, as if it could shield me from the enormity of what I still had to face. Outside, the sky had darkened, and a light drizzle was beginning to fall, drawing gray trails across the car windows. I knew my search was far from over. The photo proved that she existed, that she loved me, but there were still so many unanswered questions. Where was she now? Was she still alive? Had she forgotten me? In the following days, as I searched through public archives and old records, I discovered that Ana Luisa Oliveira had officially disappeared in 1986, just 1 year after abandoning me at the orphanage. There were no records of her marriage, children, or death. It was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. I hired a private investigator again, this time a specialist in cold cases. I gave him everything I had: the note, the necklace, the photograph, the hospital records, the newspaper ad. I asked him to look not only for official records, but also for forgotten stories, for people who might have crossed her path. While I waited, my life went into a state of suspension. I worked mechanically, ate without tasting anything, slept little, and dreamed a lot. I dreamed of a woman with sad eyes who whispered my name in the fog. I dreamed of hugs I had never received, of words that were never said. Finally, after weeks of torturous waiting, the investigator called me. He had found a clue. A woman named Ana, using another surname, had been seen in the 1990s working as a seamstress in a small town over 1,000 kilometers away. She lived a reclusive life, spoke little about her past, and avoided any deeper contact. The physical description matched, but what really caught the eye was a detail that seemed impossible to be a coincidence. She always wore a silver necklace with a crescent moon pendant. My heart almost stopped. Without thinking twice, I packed my things and hit the road. For hours, I drove through empty highways and small towns forgotten by time. Every mile I drove seemed to bring me closer not only to her, but also to a part of myself that I didn't even know still existed. I arrived in the city at night. It was a simple place, with narrow streets, modest houses, and a central square dominated by an old church of dark stones. I discreetly asked around about a seamstress named Anna. Some people vaguely remembered her. They said she lived alone, in a modest house on the outskirts, and that she almost never went out. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like the entire village could hear it. I followed the signs until I found the house, a simple building, painted light blue, with closed curtains and a small, unkempt garden in front. I parked the car across the street and stood there for a few minutes, trying to gather my courage. What if she didn't recognize me? What if you rejected me? What if it wasn't her? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I needed to know. I needed to try. Crossing the street with hesitant steps, I stopped in front of the door and rang the bell. The sound echoed inside the house, muffled. I waited, feeling the sweat trickle down the back of my neck despite the cold night. Then I heard slow footsteps approaching. The door creaked softly as it opened. She was there. Older, yes. Her hair now flecked with white, but with the same deep, sad gaze as the young woman in the photograph. And hanging around her neck, gleaming in the dim light of the porch, was the pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I didn't know whether to cry, smile, or run. My legs felt like they were stuck to the ground. Ana Luisa? My voice came out in a broken whisper. She frowned in confusion. Her eyes traveled over my face, searching for clues, memories, fragments of a long-buried past. And then something changed in her expression. A quiet recognition, a trembling in her hands. Tears began to form in her eyes. "My God," she murmured, her voice breaking. "My God, it's you." My legs finally gave out. I fell to my knees on the porch, crying uncontrollably. She knelt with me, pulling me into a shaking, tight, desperate hug. We stayed like that, two lost souls finding each other in the middle of the storm of feelings that surrounded us. "Forgive me," she whispered repeatedly. "Forgive me, my little star." We cried together, locked in an embrace that seemed to want to sew together all the years of pain and absence. When we finally managed to compose ourselves, she invited me in. The house was simple but welcoming. It smelled of lavender and freshly baked bread. Small mementos were scattered throughout the shelves. Pictures of flowers, old embroidery, worn books. It was the home of someone who was trying, in some way, to fill the void in his chest. Sitting at the kitchen table, with 2 cups of steaming tea between us, Anna began to tell her story. And what I heard changed everything I thought I knew about abandonment, sacrifice, and love. Anna held the cup in both hands, as if the warmth of the tea could shield her from the memories that were beginning to surface. Her eyes were red, but there was a painful determination in her expression. She needed to tell me everything, and I needed to hear it, even if it hurt. "I was very young," she began, her voice low and trembling. "I was only 16 when I got pregnant with you. My family was complicated, controlling. My father, especially, was a strict man, obsessed with his reputation. To him, a pregnant unmarried daughter was the greatest dishonor imaginable." She looked away, lost in bitter memories. "When I found out I was pregnant, I tried to hide it as much as I could. But of course it didn't last long. When they found out..." Her voice trailed off for a moment. It was as if I had ceased to exist for them. My father threw me out of the house that same night, shouting that I had destroyed everything he had built. He closed his eyes for a moment, fighting back tears. I wandered the streets, not knowing what to do, where to go. I slept on park benches, in temporary shelters. It was a dark time, so dark, and you, inside me, were the only light I had. Her words penetrated me like sharp knives, but also like balm. For the first time, I saw her pain. My pain was not isolated. She had suffered too. When you were born, she smiled, a sad and broken smile. It was the most beautiful and most terrible moment of my life. I held you in my arms and knew that I could never protect you from that world. I was just a girl, homeless, without support, afraid, so afraid. She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. I tried to be with you. I swear I tried. I worked cleaning houses, sewing at night, doing whatever I could. But they found me. I frowned, confused. They? Anna nodded slowly. My father. He found me through acquaintances. He sent men to threaten me. They said that if I didn't disappear from the city with you, horrible things would happen. Not just to me, but to you too. My stomach turned. It was worse than I imagined. I knew I couldn't protect you. I knew that if I stayed, I would put your life at risk. So one rainy night, I wrapped you in the best blanket I could find, wrote that note with hands that were shaking with fear, and left you at the orphanage. She covered her face with her hands, crying silently. I never stopped thinking about you. Never. Every birthday, every Christmas, every moment. I wondered where you were, if you were safe, if you knew how much you were loved, even from afar. My own tears flowed uncontrollably. It was as if my entire life, all the years of emptiness, were being rewritten before me. After that, she continued, I moved to another city. I changed my name. I worked as a seamstress. I lived in the shadows. I was so afraid of being found again. But deep down, I always knew that one day, maybe, you would look for me. And I prayed every night for that day to come. We were silent for a long time. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and sacred. There was no way to erase the years lost. The pain suffered, but there was something stronger there, slowly being born between us. Forgiveness. I tried to understand my life without you. I whispered, but I always missed something I couldn't name. Now I know. It was you. She reached across the table and I took it, squeezing it tightly. The touch was warm, real, genuine. For the first time, I felt like I was coming home. We spent hours talking. She wanted to know everything about me, where I lived, how I grew up, what I loved, what I feared, and I wanted to absorb every detail of her life, like a thirsty sponge. As dawn approached, Anna got up and went to a small dresser in the corner of the room. From there, she took out an antique wooden box, carefully polished. I saved this for you, he said, placing the box in my hands. Inside were little treasures, a lock of hair wrapped in ribbon, a pair of baby shoes, unsent letters she wrote to me for each birthday, faded photographs of flowers and places she dreamed of showing me one day. I leafed through the letters, reading words that crossed time like arrows of light. My little star, today you are 5 years old. I hope you are growing up strong and happy. I think about you every day. My little star, today is your 15th birthday. I wonder if you like music, books, if you dance when you are alone. My little star, today you are an adult. If you ever look for me, I want you to know, I never stopped loving you. Those letters were living proof that I was never as alone as I thought. Even invisible, even distant. Her love accompanied me silently throughout my life. I closed the box with trembling hands, tears streaming silently. I looked up at her and saw, for the first time, my mother. Not the fragile, broken woman who hid from the world, but the warrior who survived so that I could live. At that moment, I knew I had found more than answers. I had found my origin, my truth, and above all, he had found the love that, despite everything, never ceased to exist. But there was still one part of the story that Anna hadn't told me. A secret she had been carrying since that rainy night. A secret that could change everything I thought I knew about my past. She hesitated, her eyes shining with unshed tears. There's something else, he said, his voice shaking. Something I need to tell you. My heart froze. What else could there be in that story already so full of pain and revelations? I stared at her, waiting, feeling the tension build like a storm about to break. And then, with a broken sigh, Anna began to reveal the secret that would forever change the course of our story. The silence between us was thick, almost palpable. Anna gripped the edge of the table tightly, her knuckles white with tension. Her eyes trembled, as if weighing each word before releasing it into the world. I knew what came next wouldn't be easy to hear, but I had to hear it. I had to know the whole truth, no matter how much it hurt. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and then began. "Back then," he said with a choked voice, "I wasn't just running away from my family's shame or my father's anger. There was something else. Something dangerous." I leaned forward, not realizing I was holding my breath. "Your father," she stopped, biting her lower lip, "wasn't what I thought he was." I felt a chill run up my spine. I was naive. I fell in love with an older, charming man who said all the right things. He promised we would take care of each other, that we would build a life together. I believed every word. I believed until I found out who he really was. Anna looked down, as if embarrassed by the memories. He was involved in bad things I was too young to fully understand. Drug trafficking, violence, corruption. When I got pregnant, I thought he would be happy. I thought we would start a family. But instead he changed. He became cold, aggressive. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, but the picture that emerged was much darker than I could have imagined. When I told him about the pregnancy, he threatened me. He said that if I had the baby and tried to involve him, I would pay with my life, and that he would take the child too. Anna began to cry silently, her voice barely coming out. "That's why I ran. That's why I hid you. Not just from my father, but from him." The ground seemed to disappear beneath my feet. I wasn't just a child abandoned by a desperate mother. I was the daughter of a dangerous man, capable of anything to protect his own interests. Anna continued, her voice barely a whisper. "I left you at the orphanage that night, believing it was the only way to keep you alive. And I disappeared so he would never find us again. My whole body was shaking. Part of me wanted to scream, to cry, to run away from there. But another, stronger part of me knew I needed to hear it through to the end. After I left you, he came looking for me. He haunted me. For years, I moved from town to town, always looking over my shoulder. I could never build a real life. I could never stay in one place for long. All I did was survive and pray that wherever you were safe." He closed his eyes, tears streaming down his time-marked cheeks. "There wasn't a single day that I didn't think about you. There wasn't a night that I didn't dream about you smiling at me, calling me Mom." Her words cut like blades. I imagined the little girl I had been, sitting alone in a cold orphanage bed. And now I also saw the woman who, despite all the risks, decided to save me in the only way she could. The weight of the revelation was crushing, but at the same time, there was a strange relief. I hadn't been rejected. I hadn't been forgotten. I had been loved enough to protect at any cost. Anna looked at me, her teary eyes shining in the dim light of the kitchen. "I know I can't erase what happened," she said, her voice breaking. "But I needed you to know the truth, that you were never abandoned. You were loved, more than my own life." The tears that ran down my face were warm, silent. I stood up and walked over to her. Without saying a word, I hugged her with all the strength I had. A hug that mixed pain, forgiveness, love, and a silent promise. We were no longer alone. We stayed like that, for a time that could not be measured, sewing years of distance into a simple touch. After a while, we sat down again, holding hands. "There is still one last thing you need to know," Anna said, her voice even lower. My eyes sought hers. He might still be out there. He might still find us." The air left my lungs all at once. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely coming out. Anna lowered her head, as if she was carrying a burden that she finally needed to share. "I tried to hide, but recently, I felt like I was being followed. I saw men who seemed to be watching me on the street. I received silent phone calls in the middle of the night. I thought it was paranoia. Until now. Fear crawled under my skin like a cold snake. Everything I thought I had left behind could, at any moment, come knocking on our door. The reunion I've waited my whole life for could be destroyed before it even begins. And for the first time, I realized that our story wasn't just about finding the truth. It was also about surviving it. Anna's words hung in the air like an invisible threat, making every shadow in the house darker, every noise louder. I looked around, as if expecting to see someone emerging from the walls, watching us. "Are you sure?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but feeling fear creeping through my veins. Anna nodded slowly. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said, "but I had to be honest. Ever since I started getting those phone calls, I've felt like I've been watched. I don't know if it's him or someone connected to him. But after you showed up, everything got even more intense." I leaned back in my chair, trying to take in what was happening. After 40 years, the threat was still upon us. Maybe it's a coincidence. I tried to argue, more to myself than to her. Anna looked at me with infinite sadness in her eyes. "Coincidence does not exist in my life, my daughter. It never has." Her words cut through the last foolish hope I was trying to cling to. We needed to act. We decided that I couldn't stay at her house. It would be too dangerous. Despite the pain we felt in being separated again after such a short time together, we knew it was the right decision. I agreed to return to my city, and from there, we would draw up a plan to protect ourselves. As 40 years ago, escape was again the only option. That night, Anna prepared a small backpack for me with some belongings and the box of letters. With each object stored, we felt time slipping through our fingers, as fragile as glass. As I walked out the door, I looked back one last time. Anna was on the balcony, hugging her own body, as if she was trying to keep herself together as she watched me leave. I promised that we would see each other soon, that we would resolve everything, that this time there would be no definitive separation. I drove down dark, empty roads, the radio off, my thoughts in a whirlwind. With every car that crossed my path, every headlight reflected in the rearview mirror, my heart raced. Was it paranoia? Or was someone really following me? It was then that I realized. Headlights. 2 points of light, fixed, constant, always keeping their distance, but never overtaking me, never disappearing. My chest tightened. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to remain calm. I swerved down a country road full of curves and potholes, hoping that if it was just a coincidence, the car would keep going. But it turned right along with me. Fear turned into pure adrenaline. I accelerated. The car behind did too. Panic gripped me, but I struggled to think rationally. I had to lose them. I had to get to safety. I advanced into a patch of dense forest. The trees formed dark tunnels above the road. My vision seemed blurred, each second a snap between life and fear. I saw a dirt road to the left and, without thinking twice, I swerved, plunging into the unknown. Dust rose in a thick cloud behind me, and for an instant, I lost control of the car, skidding violently. But I managed to stay on track. I looked in the rearview mirror. Nothing. The car was gone. I tried to control my breathing, but my hands were still shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. I pulled over onto the makeshift shoulder and turned off the engine, listening for any sound other than the frantic beating of my heart. The silence was total. Did I really lose them? Or were they waiting for me somewhere ahead? I decided not to take any risks. I picked up my cell phone, my hands shaking, and called Anna. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then the call dropped. I tried again. No signal. I looked around. I was isolated, surrounded only by trees, with the moon hidden behind heavy clouds. I was completely alone. My instinct was screaming at me not to stay there. I started the car again and began driving slowly, trying to find my way back to the main road. Every noise in the woods made me jump in my seat. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I found an old sign indicating the direction to the highway. I followed it as if it were the last line of salvation. When I reached the main road, I sped off without looking back. I managed to arrive in my city at dawn, exhausted, with my body and mind in tatters. I parked in front of my building and took a deep breath before getting out of the car. The city was still asleep, enveloped in a heavy silence. I grabbed my backpack and ran to the front gate, as if the past itself was right behind me. I hurried up the stairs, entered the apartment, and locked the door with all the locks available. Only then did I allow myself to break down. I sat on the living room floor, hugging my knees, tears falling without resistance. The reunion I had dreamed of my entire life was now turning into a race for survival. Anna was in danger. I was in danger. And deep down, I knew. This was just the beginning. I needed to act. I needed to find a way to protect both of us. Because if he was still looking for us, he wouldn't stop until he found us. And this time, I wouldn't let him take anything from me. Never again. The morning arrived pale and cold, but it didn't bring the peace I so desperately needed. My thoughts were cloudy, jumbled, as if reality had turned into a bad dream from which I couldn't wake up. The first thing I did was try to call Anna again. It rang twice, until it went straight to voicemail. A chill ran down my spine. Something was wrong. I knew she was cautious, but I also knew we had promised to keep in constant contact. Not answering was a sign that could not be ignored. Without hesitation, I decided to return to the small town where she lived. I quickly prepared everything: documents, a little money, my charged cell phone, and in my backpack, along with the letters she had given me, I put the crescent moon necklace. That was now a symbol of our connection, and of the strength I needed to carry. I hit the road again, this time paying attention to every movement around me. Every car that appeared in my rearview mirror made me grip the steering wheel tighter. I arrived in town shortly after noon. The place seemed even emptier, quieter, as if the entire village was holding its breath. I went straight to Anna's house. As soon as I parked, something felt wrong. The front door was ajar. I ran out of the car, my heart hammering in my chest. I screamed her name, but the only sound that answered was the ominous creak of the door swinging in the wind. I pushed the door open and walked in. The house was a mess. Chairs were overturned, curtains were torn, papers were scattered across the floor. Signs of a struggle were clear as day. Fear turned to panic. I ran from room to room, calling for her. Nothing. She wasn't there. On the kitchen table, one thing caught my attention: the small letter box. The lid was open, and the letters were lying around as if someone had been rummaging through them in a hurry. There was also something new: a ticket, unsigned, written in shaky letters. If you want to see her again, come alone. 10 p.m. at the old shed down the road. No police, no tricks. My body froze. They had taken her. My mother. The woman I had searched for my entire life. And now, when I finally found her again, she was in the hands of those she had run from all her life. I closed my eyes for a moment, fighting back the despair. I needed to think. I needed to act fast. I spent the whole day putting together a plan. I knew I couldn't call the police. They'd warned me. I knew I couldn't count on outside help. It was just me, but I wouldn't be a victim. I stopped at the only store open in town and bought a flashlight, a small backpack, a rope, and some makeshift tools. If there was a chance of saving her, I would take it with all my might. When the clock struck 9:30 p.m., I was already in position. The old shed by the road was an abandoned place, forgotten among dry fields and twisted trees. Its rotten wooden walls creaked in the cold breeze, and the roof looked like it was about to collapse. I approached silently, hidden in the shadows, watching. 2 men stood at the entrance, armed, smoking and talking quietly. At the back of the shed, I saw a dim light. She should be there. My heart was beating so hard I could barely breathe. I waited for the right moment. When one of them walked away to answer the phone, I slipped around the opposite side of the shed, finding a broken window I could peer through. Inside, I saw Anna, tied to a chair, her face bruised, but alive. And standing before her, aged but still exuding an aura of power and danger, was he, my father, the man who was the source of all our pain. Even from a distance, I recognized the cruel gleam in his eyes, the coldness of his gestures. He was saying something I couldn't hear, but Anna, even though weak, looked at him with a dignity that filled me with pride. There was no more room for fear inside me. The only thing left was determination. I quickly scanned the warehouse. I spotted a pile of stacked boxes that I could use to create a distraction. I picked up a rock from the ground and threw it hard in the opposite direction, making a loud noise that echoed throughout the place. The men immediately stirred. Taking advantage of the confusion, I slipped through the broken window and snuck up to Anna. "It's me," I whispered, touching his shoulder. Her eyes widened, tears immediately welling up. "We'll get you out of here," I promised. With trembling hands, I cut the makeshift bonds with a small blade I had hidden in my pocket. Anna could barely move, but with my support, she managed to stand. I tried to take her back through the window, but then we heard the scream. "They're here." It all happened too quickly. Lights were turned on, footsteps echoed on the concrete, shouts of order filled the warehouse. I held Anna tightly and we ran as fast as we could. The flashlight in my hand shook, illuminating the winding path between rubble and rusty beams. Behind us, we heard the footsteps of men, the curses, the threats. I saw a half-fallen side door and pushed it with all my strength, opening a narrow passage to the outside. "Let's go!" I shouted. Running through the forest, feeling branches cutting my skin, I thought of nothing else but escaping. Then a shot rang out in the night. Anna stumbled into my arms. "No!" I shouted, but she was still conscious, just exhausted. I kept running, even though she was almost passed out, until I found my car hidden among the trees, engine running, ready to escape. I threw my backpack in the back seat and helped Anna get in. I started the car and accelerated, tires screeching on the cracked asphalt, leaving behind the warehouse, the men, and the past that had haunted us for so long. But I knew we weren't saved yet. They knew who we were now, and they wouldn't stop. Not until they finished what they started 40 years ago. The road seemed endless beneath the wheels of the car. Every distant headlight was a potential threat. Every empty intersection was a trap waiting to close. He drove without looking back, without thinking twice. All that mattered was moving forward. Anna was in the passenger seat, her face pale and her eyes closed. Every now and then she would mumble something, disjointed words, as if she were caught between sleep and wakefulness. I held her with one hand while I drove with the other, as if I could protect her from life, from time, from the past. We didn't know where we were going, only that we couldn't stay. I drove for hours, crossing small towns and deserted highways, until I found a quiet, forgotten roadside motel. I parked in the back, out of sight of the street. I carried Anna in my arms to the room, ignoring the pain that throbbed in my exhausted muscles. Inside the simple, worn-out room, I arranged Anna on the bed. She opened her eyes, weak but alive. "You came back to me," he whispered, his voice hoarse. I held his hand with all the strength I had. "I will never leave you again," I promised. I spent that night caring for her, applying cold compresses to her forehead, cleaning the small cuts on her arms, making sure she took sips of water. I watched her every move, her every breath, as if the simple act of being there was enough to protect her from harm. But deep down, I knew we needed help. We couldn't hide forever on our own. As Anna fell into a deep sleep, I silenced the fear within me and did what was necessary. I picked up my phone and called someone who had helped me once, a long time ago, a social worker who now worked at an NGO that protected victims of threats. I told her our story. Not all the details, but enough for her to understand the gravity of the situation. She listened in silence, and then simply said, "Come here. We will protect you." At dawn, with the sky tinged with gray and a heavy heart, I set off with Anna towards the NGO. It was a long journey, but every kilometer traveled was a small victory over fear. We arrived at the NGO headquarters in the early afternoon. The place was protected, discreet, surrounded by security. There, we were welcomed by friendly faces, outstretched hands, promises that this time, no one would find us. In the following days, Anna received medical treatment. I received counseling. We both began to rebuild, piece by piece, the life that was stolen from us. It was weird at first. We had never lived as a real mother and daughter. There were moments of uncomfortable silence, awkward gestures, pain that surfaced when we least expected it. But there was also laughter. Small at first, shy, but real. There were mornings when we made coffee together and Anna told stories about her youth. There were nights when we sat on the improvised balcony and gazed at the stars, in silence, as if we could make up for lost time with our gaze. I learned to know her, and she, to know me. I discovered that we had the same taste for old books, that we both cried at silly movies, that we shared the habit of singing softly while we cooked, and little by little, we were healing. I understood that the pain we carried didn't have to define us, that the scars were part of our story, but they were not the end of it. One day, as we were walking through the NGO's square, Anna stopped, looked at me and said, "I love you, my little star." The words I've waited my whole life to hear. I cried like a child in her arms, and for the first time, I felt something I had never truly felt before. Belonging. It didn't matter what we had lost. It mattered what we had found. To ourselves. Our story. In the following months, with the help of the NGO, we were able to change our identity and rebuild our lives away from those who threatened us. The NGO activated legal contacts and additional protection. We never heard from him or the men who followed him again. It was as if we had finally ended the cycle of fear that had been haunting us. We started a new life in another city, discreet, but full of possibilities. We rented a small house with a neglected garden that we began to cultivate together. Anna learned to use social media to follow sewing groups. I went back to school, something I had abandoned very early on. Little by little, we started creating new birthdays, new traditions. We made cakes for no reason. We walked without rushing. We exchanged notes left on the fridge with crude drawings of moons and stars. And one night, sitting on the porch under the sky full of constellations, Anna said to me, "Life tried to separate us. It tried to destroy us. But love," I finished, holding his hand. "Love always found a way." She smiled, a smile full of light. And there, under that infinite sky, I understood that everything we had been through was not in vain. Every tear, every lonely night, every desperate search, they brought us here. And finally we were free. Free to live, free to love, free to be mother and daughter, forever. If this story touched you in any way, leave yours in the comments. Each subscription helps spread these stories to more people who need to believe in the power of hope. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and continue this journey of stories that touch the soul. End.